This conference will now be recorded.
Gotcha.
All right, Chris. So, in your most confident voice, we're going to start these exercises, learning activity 5. Can you give me, I usually do case, number, gender, but if you want to keep it the same order, that's fine. Can you give me case, gender, number, lexical form, and provide a translation of theou?
Yes, so it's genitive, masculine, singular, theos, and God.
If it's genitive, how would you translate that? What's the sort of helper word for the genitive?
Right.
Scroll down.
So theou or
yeah, look at here right here. Theou.
Wait. So you mean genitive? So gods?
It is singular. So
is that what we're looking for?
Oh, you're saying gods with an apostrophe s?
I meant as in possessive. I wasn't exactly sure what you were looking for there.
Yeah, that works. The helper word I was talking about would be of God. Does that make sense? So of is most of the time used as a helper word to translate the genitive.
Yes, that does make sense.
Okay. All right. Ab Christou.
So we're looking it up on my iPad. It doesn't have quite as much information listed as, because it doesn't give me the definition, even though I know it's something with Christ. But it's genitive, singular, masculine. Would it be of Christ?
Yep.
Wasn't that what the U was?
Christos, and then it's of Christ. Okay. Anybody have any problems with those? Anybody not understand how we got those? I guess I could show you how. So if you highlight this, double click it, it gives you this right here, which is the GSM part, genitive, singular, masculine. Okay. This is the way I normally do it, which is case, then number, then gender. For whatever reason, he has case, then gender, then number. Personally, I prefer this. I was just trying to keep it the same order. So when you have the genitive,
standard way to do that?
Case, number, gender is the way I've heard it every single time. Okay. I don't know why he does it this way, but anyway. So it's case, number, gender, lexical form, then inflected form. So the translation. Genitive, usually you add the word of before whatever it is, whatever the definition word is. So Christou would be of Christ. All right. Any volunteers from Woodbury? No? Okay. I will pick on Stan, okay? Stan, are you ready? I'm going to walk you through it, so it's not like you have to worry about anything.
Okay.
All right. So using our tool here, we double click Theo. Didn't highlight it first. Oh, and of course it's not going to work for me when I'm trying to show you how to do it. Is that might be the one I couldn't get us to do earlier. Yeah.
Somebody changed. You changed the internet.
They changed it down here. You gotta log back in.
Which one do you do?
What's wrong?
Either one, it don't matter.
No.
Either one.
Is it WCOC?
It's just
On the
capital
phone number?
CSC.
Huh?
Just capital CSC, no W. Oh, we're logging into the internet.
Okay. Can you see what I'm doing up here?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so the word here is Theo. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, so coming over here, the N means it's a noun. Do you remember what the D stands for?
Active.
Dative, but yeah. Okay. All right, the S stands for
Singular.
singular. Yes, so we'll keep the same order for the sake of doing it the way he said, but yeah, so dative masculine singular. Over here is your lexical form, which is theos, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you know how you would translate the dative of Theo? I briefly mentioned this last week.
I don't remember it. Quentin,
In God or two.
is it in
Yeah.
or of? In or of?
In, with,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
to God, okay? And context is going to tell you which one it is.
Okay.
Okay? So something along those lines. And like I said, usually you're going to be able to figure out whenever you're translating exactly which one it would be, because it's only going to be the only one that makes sense in English. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Anyone want to try this one?
Like Jerry does.
All right, we're going to do the same thing. So let me get it pulled up here. Okay.
Kathy, we just gotta get the program to work, so we can just click on the word. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is your word.
I gotta get close.
Can you see what this is? So it's this one.
High?
What's that?
I'm trying to see it, to say it high.
I can see it less.
Gamma, Eta, Sigma. GACE.
Gaze.
So what does the G stand for?
Yes. Genitive.
All right, so it's genitive. The S stands for,
That's the singular.
and the F is
The feminine.
feminine. So it's genitive, feminine, singular from gay. Do you know how you would translate that? Helps if you know what that word means. So I'll help you out. Geis means earth.
So the of earth.
Of earth or of the earth,
So
depending on what the context is. So if it's a piece of pottery, it would be a pot of earth. If it's someone who is from the earth, it would be of the earth. Okay? Who wants to take this one? Logon.
So it's accusative, masculine, singular.
All right. And from what? The lexical form would be, it's what's over here on the right. What do you think the lexical form of logon would be?
It'll have something to do with word.
Logos.
Yeah, logos is the lexical form. So
Word.
yep. So the inflected meaning would be
Of the word.
with the accusative, it's just word.
Oh.
Okay.
Word.
All right. Who's left? Kathy. Anthropu.
Okay, we got it.
Is it singular, masculine? What is G? Genitive?
All right. And what do you think the lexical form of anthropu would be?
Anthropos?
Anthropos. And what would the inflected meaning be?
A man or male man.
Male, man?
Okay, so if you look up at these other genitives, what's been the helping word we've used?
Man.
Of men or of man?
Yeah, of man. Okay. So like a good example is huios anthropou is son of man. Okay. All right, Victoria. Hemeris.
Hemeris can either be genitive, singular, feminine, from hemera, meaning of day or of the day, or it can occur as accusative, plural, feminine, hemera, day. Days.
Okay. So this particular one, as Victoria pointed out, this can mean two different things. These other two are special cases, and I don't want you to worry about them. These that are over 50 times are really the ones that matter. Hemeris has the same form in both the genitive singular and the accusative plural. Now, I've already told Victoria this, so she is not allowed to cheat, But how would you be able to tell those apart if it was in a sentence? Any guesses?
Probably depending on whether the subject is masculine or singular or plural.
You're kind of getting toward the right idea. It does have to do with the sentence itself, but the sentence could be so. This could modify something masculine also. So you could have a masculine subject and have the word, whenever it's using the genitive, a lot of times it's translated as daily. So of the day, daily is pretty close to the meaning of that. So you could have a daily thing that was masculine, but that doesn't change this to a masculine. Any other guesses?
What if when you were translating the sentence, there already was a word filling the genitive space? So then you would know there wouldn't be two?
You can have multiple genitives in one sentence. A common one is Curio, Wisu, Christu, Huios, Theu. That's Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. So all of those except for Huios are genitives. So it comes down to what article it has. So we haven't talked about it much, but the definite article we learned as the definite article changes based on what it's modifying. And there's a fun little song that's to the tune of Three Blind Mice that I can teach you one day, and you're going to love it. But you tell based on which one it has. So if it has a genitive, singular, and feminine article, you know that it's genitive, singular, feminine. If it has a accusative plural, you know that it is an accusative plural. And whenever you look at the sentence, whenever you hover over it, it will show you that. Okay? And we're going to look at a couple sentences today before we get done. All right? So that's kind of the hardest one, is these where it can be two different things. So I'm going to go back. I guess kind of as a quick overview to get back to where we're at. Can someone remind me the main function of the nominative case?
The subject.
Okay. Nominative is mainly the subject. The genitive.
Possession.
Yep. It can do some other things, but mainly possession. The dative.
Indirect object.
Yep.
Indirect object.
Yep, it's the closest to the English indirect object. And then the accusative.
Direct object receives action of the verb.
Yep. So the English direct object. That's if you're just in general terms, those are what the four cases mainly do. And we talked briefly about the vocative case. The vocative is used for what?
Again, Aaron, what did you say?
Indicates a direct address.
Yep, direct address. So we skipped it, but actually the next one was Curie. This is a vocative. Okay. So we talked last week The three main types of nominatives I want you to know are the subject, the predicate nominative, and nominatives in apposition. Does anyone remember how I said, I guess the two things about the predicate nominative? When will you find a predicate nominative? What type of verb?
Being verb, I am.
Yeah, so the main one you need to know is with a me. There's a few other instances, but a me is going to be far and away the most common. All right, it kind of works like an equal sign in that particular case. So you can think about if you need an equal sign, you need two things that are equal, so you need two nominatives. Okay, so next is the genitive, the more complex genitive. Okay, so we've talked about the first one listed here, the genitive of possession. We usually use of whenever we make translations. That's more of a tradition thing than it is actually a something that's spelled out directly in the language. I would challenge you, if you're doing your own translating, if you think it's a genitive of possession, do it as an apostrophe S. Why would I want you to do that? Any ideas? So the reason is because if you translate something as an apostrophe S, you have told them, yes, I think this is a possessive genitive. Whenever you use things besides the apostrophe S and just use the word of, it can be a little ambiguous. You've pretty much decided to take a stand if you use the apostrophe S and said, yes, I think this is possessive. Now, if you're reading something that was made to be up to the interpretation of the reader rather than the interpretation of the translator, yeah, probably leaving it ambiguous is the best. But for the purpose of you doing something for me, I would rather you tell me what you think it is. And using the way that you translate it to dictate that is a good way to show me that. Okay. The next one is the genitive of relationship. The genitive of relationship is usually used in whenever we're talking about familial relationships. The one that comes to mind, big floating things in my way. All right, so this is, that's not exactly what I was looking for. Does anyone have a translation of the Bible close?
We've got a few of them. What you need?
Turn to Matthew chapter 1 and verse 6.
You ready?
Yeah.
And Jesse, the father of David the king, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah.
Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. So I don't know if you can tell this. The word for wife is not used here. It's ektes tu huriu. Tes is the genitive feminine article, and this is the masculine genitive article. So instead of using the name or using wife, this isn't exactly the same as what this is talking about. This is close. It uses this article here in the genitive to display a familial relationship, even though the word wife is not mentioned here. And what were you reading from?
That's the ESV.
That's the ESV? Okay. So the ESV has interpreted this, and I think rightly so, that the reason for this repetition of the article is to show that familial relationship, even though wife, the word wife is not used there. So that is called a genitive of relationship. And you can see here, Simon Ioannou. So it's Simon, son of John. That's John 21:16. Okay. So next one it has on here is the attributive genitive. The attributive genitive, as it puts here, is like an adjective, describing the attribute of the noun, using of or translating the genitive immediately prior to the other noun is how these types are used. So, ha krites tes adikias. So, judge of unrighteousness, or unrighteous judge. This is what I was talking about last week, how some people are taught that this means this is always possessive. This is a good example of whenever it's acting as a modifier rather than a possessive. Okay. Just like the nominative, the genitive can also be used in apposition, and it's once again just two words in the same case after one another. This is actually more than just two. This is all four. Sotereos, Hemon, Yesu, Christou. Our Savior, and it's really the Savior of us, Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ isn't possessive in this case. It's not a modifier. It's really acting as something by itself. And that this particular one, it is the genitive. It's in apposition. The next one is genitive of comparison. This one you're really not going to be able to notice just by looking in Greek, but once you start translating the sentence, most of the time it only makes sense by doing it this way. So a very, very literal translation of this is, the other disciple ran quickly of Peter. Okay. There's no way here to tell that it's more quickly, but if I say that sentence to you, does everyone feel like they would be pretty comfortable figuring out that it is supposed to be some sort of comparison? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. The subjective genitive is this, like it says here, has a verbal idea in it. So, tes agapes, so the love of Christ. It's words that often have a verbal equivalent. That's pretty much, it's hard to tell whenever this is different than the possessive. And one of the biggest arguments becomes between subjective genitive and the next one, objective genitive. So this is the object with a baked-in verbal idea versus a subject with a baked-in verbal idea. I won't get into too much depth as I guess they went ahead and did it. So I'll show you that this right here, open that up. Oh, where is it at? Now, I'll show you next week. There's a big argument, and I thought it was in Romans 8. It might be in Romans 7. There's an example where something could be either a subjective genitive or an objective genitive, and it completely changes the interpretation. And if you read what's called the New Perspective on Paul, there's a lot of emphasis on it being an objective instead of a subjective. Okay. Genitive of night, or genitive of time, you see athen, pros, auton, nuktos. So we would say during the night, although where I'm from, of the night is a pretty common saying. He came to him of night. So during the night is how we would say that. Time can be expressed in every single case, but usually the genitive is the one that is used to describe like the time of day. All right, the genitive direct object, there are certain verbs, like it says here, that take the genitive. And it may need the word of. If I remember right, akuo, which is the word for I hear, if I remember correctly, it takes the genitive for objects. So that's one example. There's no rule or anything. It's just you have to know that certain words take the genitive. And most of the time, whenever you look at it in context, it's the only word that makes sense. And the last one is the descriptive genitive. Really, every single genitive is a descriptive genitive. But if there's a more specific grouping, you should go with the more specific grouping. The descriptive is sort of a catch-all whenever you really don't have anything else to classify it into. Okay. What questions do you have about the genitive case? It is the most complicated.
Is there some resource that actually lists at least what they think, which one of these that it is?
So if you go through Wallace, he has some examples, kind of like he has some examples here. But really, the only time you're going to be able to look up specific instances is in a commentary. Those are the only times that this sort of thing is written about. There is something called the Exegetical Guide to the Greek New Testament. And I have a copy of all of those if you'd like to see them, all the ones that are published so far. And they go pretty deep on the subject because that's what it's about. It's looking at this particular syntax type questions, and trying to parse out which one they think it is. I will tell you that the more you do these, it becomes, I wouldn't say obvious, but you can usually narrow it down to 2 or 3 things, because there's only 2 or 3 things it can be. But if you would like to look at it, Wallace is the most comprehensive. He also has about 30 more different uses of the genitive than the ones listed here. These are the main ones, but there are more than this. The printout I'm giving you has the summary of all this information. What other questions? Okay. Read through this, get a general idea, understand that there are going to be times when you look at it and you have difficulty deciding which one you think it actually is. And that's whenever it's your job to look at what the text is saying, to look at similar texts and how certain words are used, and to decide for yourself which one you think it is. For the purpose of translating for me, I will never count something wrong as long as you put the reasoning for your choice. So that's what I want to see, and I'll show you. Probably we'll need to go through at least a little bit of the stuff next week before I show you what I want. But all I care about is, why did you arrive at what you arrived at? Because you might have noticed something that nobody else has noticed before. That's usually not likely, but every now and then somebody will have an idea that nobody's ever explored before. Chris was talking about how his brother-in-law had noticed that the Lord's Supper is not genitive. It's dative, correct? Isn't that right?
Actually, I think it's accusative.
Oh, it's accusative. That makes it even more complicated. So instead of being possessive, it's, if anything, I guess it would have to be an apposition. So it wouldn't be the supper of the Lord. It would be something like the Lordly Supper or something like that. Woodbury, is there a question?
I got one. Looking at all the different translations, you say you have to, when we translate, we want to defend our wording or whatever. How, I guess the term is, some of the things that some of the translations are extremely, I know, going into details as you read them. And I know you're wanting to stay away from that. You're wanting to get the correct way of what we're trying to learn. So what I'm saying is that you read a verse, and like what I'm looking at is, in particularly Bible Hub, for example, breaks every single word down. And I'm saying, is that necessary to convey my idea? Because I don't usually talk that way.
So my guess is, when you're translating 2 John, you probably won't need to do that. But it is short enough that if somebody wanted to, it's 13 verses, and I think they're about 7 or 8 words a piece. You could do that if you spent a weekend. It really wouldn't be that hard if you wanted to do that. That's not really what I'm expecting, because some of these, like ha presbyteros, okay? This is nominative singular masculine, the elder. do I need you to go into depth of why that you think that is the subject of the sentence?
Yeah, I kind of see what I would do with that.
Yeah.
I don't know that, I don't know what, based on what I'm trying to learn, I don't know that it would matter to me to go into that in depth as to.
Right. What I would like for you to do is, if there is an exegetically significant difference between something. So this is ha presbyteros, and then electe curiae. That's because it's long, because it's got the iota below it. Kai tois technois autes. So this is the elder. This is a dative, and I don't know if you can tell this, there's no actual verb in the sentence. So this is an address, the elder, to the elect lady and the children of her. Okay? There really is no big exegetical important thing here, except you could say that this dative would be in apposition to curia, and curia would be a dative of address. That is the only even possibly syntactically significant thing in the sentence, and that is a bit of a stretch. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Don't find things to talk about. But if there is something that's important to talk about, you should mention it.
All right, I'll give it a shot.
Okay. So let's try to at least get through the end of the chapter. Going through the datives, the first one is exactly what we talked about, the indirect object. And this is usually going to be translated with to, okay? That one's not very complicated. The dative of interest is, that's interest in the action of the sentence. I don't know if that's the best way to think about this, but this is a lot of times looked as, I learned it as two separate things, as the dative of benefit and the dative of maleficence. So if it's doing something good for the action, for whatever the dative is, or if it's doing something bad, that's a dative of interest. So it's either good or bad. They just can't combine the two. Dative of reference, as it says here, you could use the words with reference to, in addition to. Two. No, that's not all of it. The example he has here is not a bad one. Logisotha eatus enai necrus men te hamartia. Consider yourselves to be dead, with reference to sin. A lot of times this is whenever you say something figurative, but you say it, if you were to interpret it literally, it wouldn't make any sense. So it gives a point of reference to what the figurative saying would be. So if we just say, consider yourselves to be dead, that wouldn't necessarily make sense. But you're dead in reference to what? Well, when it comes to sinning, you are dead. Does that make sense to everyone? Yes, no? Okay. The way that I picked this one out is I translate it the way you would normally do with the indirect object, and I see if it would make more sense if you added with reference. If it doesn't, I leave it out and consider it to be an indirect object. If it makes more sense with reference, then I consider it a dative of reference. Okay. Apposition, once again, two datives next to each other would be considered in apposition. Paradoken, pilato, to, hegemonoi. They handed him over to Pilate, the governor. The governor here being in apposition to Pilate. Dative of sphere. If you remember last week, I talked about the locative. This is one of the forms of the locative. It has to do with location when the location is something that is not physical. So the churches grew in faith. Well, were they actually inside of faith? No, they weren't inside of faith, but they grew in the sphere of faith. Dative of time. It is usually used with reference to a time when something will happen or has happened. So the genitive is used for time of day and things along those lines. The dative has more to do with the, as it says here, on the third day. So a particular interval has passed. All right, datives of association is usually translated with. So, oi de Andres, oi sundenmatus auto. The men who were traveling with him. You could and still have a sentence translate this to him, but the context of Acts 9, you can clearly see that it's intended to be with. Okay. Dative of means is by or how something was done. So, ex belon ta pneumata lago. He cast out the spirits by a word or by means of a word. A lot of people look at, so that's Ephesians 2:10. I got it here. That's before this. Oh, it was here. So, tegar carita este sesamenoi dia pistiois. For it is by grace you are saved through faith. Most scholars, even the Calvinists really, have landed on that charity here is intended to be a dative of means. So it's the method or what is doing it. So by means of grace, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is something exclusive. So it's the action behind thing, it's the instrument being used, but you kind of have to take my word for it. Whenever you start using that sort of language, it implies that the grace is something that is not in isolation and not acting by itself, that there has to be certain ways for the grace to start acting. And from a exegetical point of view, this actually supports the traditional Church of Christ doctrine toward how grace is obtained. Traditionally, and I guess this is the other aspect of this, traditionally, most of the Calvinists have considered it a dative of cause. So they would say, instead of by means of, they would say because of. So instead of saying by means of grace, it's because of grace. So there's a pretty good example of where this actually comes up. And if you want to look at older Calvinist commentaries, they make very strong arguments for this particular usage of the dative. Any question on the dative? Okay. We'll finish up with the accusative. There's just a few here. So the accusative is the direct object. That's what we've already learned. It can also be a double direct object. So sometimes you need of to make this make sense. Exeducen, auton, tain, kleidua. They stripped him of his robe. So you can see here that this is a third declension accusative. So him of the robe. It can also be used in apposition. Any questions on the accusative? So I'm not going to do this particular thing. This exercise here, learning activity 5, might be something worthwhile to go through and do yourself. Just open up in Logos. So 1 John 1, 5 through 10, and go through it. Once again, you don't have to know what any of these words mean, but if you hover over these, it's going to tell you what, it's going to parse it for you. So you're going to be able to see pretty quickly, oh, that's a conjunction, that's a verb. Oh, here's a pronoun. What's its case, number, and gender? Oh, here's a noun. What's its case, number, and gender? And just looking through these, you don't have to necessarily make a note like this, but just kind of get used to using the program to see what is and what isn't a noun. So what I would like you to do you can practice some of these. These are third declension words. You can tell that the way that they look are just a little bit different. But what I want you to do is go through and see if using the program, if you can read through John 1 through, let's just start off with 1 through 5. Okay? See if you can read John 3, 1 through 5. And you don't have to write anything down. I'm just going to ask you some questions about what you learned when you get done. Okay? And we'll spend probably about 10 minutes beginning of class next time talking about it.